once again, though, you're not going to drive luxury cars off teacher salaries, and I hope you're prepared for that, and I hope that you're in teaching for the right reasons, and that doesn't always include, becoming wealthy. I did go to Vanderbilt, got my master's at Vanderbilt 20 years later from starting teaching, so obviously 1996. And I got a degree in behavior disorders, as part of the special education department. And so I studied about children that have severe behavioral problems. That was significant because one of my jobs, well, several of my jobs have been involved with behavior. And I'll tell you a little bit about that as we walk through. And then finally, I got my EDS degree from MTSU. Some years later, and never considered going to get my doctorate. So I'll leave it at that. I've worked for Knox County Schools for a number of years before moving here. I moved here in '94, and then went to work at Smyrna Middle School. And somebody told me they were at Smyrna Middle School today. And so that's where I entered in this area. Taught in a behavior classroom at Smyrna Middle School for 3 or 4 years. Then moved to the central office. After I finished my degree at Vanderbilt, I was able to start a new position as a behavioral specialist, and I traveled around Rutherford County. So I worked for Rutherford County at that time. And I worked with teachers that were working with children that had severe behavior problems. So as a consultant, I would go in and give them ideas, suggestions, find out what was going on, and see if I can help them figure out ways to make the child be successful in the classroom. I also supervised a lot of other programs, which include behavior intervention classrooms and supervised contract schools that provided services as well. So that sort of gets me up to the last 2 years. Year before last, I started with Murfreesboro City Schools as their director of special education services, and went from a really large district. Rutherford County Schools is a big district with 8 schools now, and we have 12 schools in Murfreesboro City Schools. Also went from a district that was pre-K through 12th grade, and now I'm at Murfreesboro City Schools, which, if you're not familiar, you're not from this area, we're a pre-K through 6th grade. At the end of 6th grade, students leave us and then go to the Rutherford County middle schools and high schools. So, and thinking about, I'll tell you what I do. Another thing I do is I teach a class here at the university. I teach a class on Tuesday nights, Special Ed 3010. It's a survey class for elementary teachers to help them understand about disabilities, special ed law. And so we spend a semester on that. It's a real general survey. I talk a lot about all the different areas of disability. And so I'll try to just run through that a little bit now to give you some ideas. Has anybody had a class in special education? Didn't know anything much about disability? Okay, let me tell you this. You will, in most cases, encounter children with disabilities in your classrooms. And I can't think of a case where you won't. I tried to think of that driving over here. I left a meeting at one of our elementary schools, and I tried to think about what would you teach that you wouldn't run into a student with a disability, and I can't think of any classes that might be. If you think of one, share that with me, because I'd like to know. I thought, okay, what some of you, anybody band folks? Okay, so you will see some children with disabilities. As a matter of fact, one of my best, I want to call him a friend. He's a student. He's going to graduate this year from Blackman High School. My wife is an assistant principal at Blackman High School, and one of the guys in their band is a young man in a wheelchair. Cerebral palsy, and his mother has for all these years, and I've known him since kindergarten. So he's getting ready to graduate, and I get chills think about this little guy. He's very special, wonderful kid. Lots of aptitude, very smart. Lots of physical disabilities that keep him from participating at the same level everybody else does, but he participates in band. And his mom, as the band marches, his mom marches, and so some of you may know Michael and have seen him perform before. He's also placed in the other bands as well, not just marching, so that's pretty cool. So once again, even if you're a band, if that's there, you'll still see some children with disabilities. You'll probably see some learning disabilities as well. So in thinking that through, let me just talk about disabilities for just a minute. And what in the 3010 class that I teach, one of the first things I do is I draw a line across the board and I talk about a continuum. And if you think about disabilities, we can think of a long continuum, and on one end is very mild disabilities, And on the other end, opposite end, we would talk about those very severe disabilities. And as we do, and as we think about that continuum throughout this semester and in that classroom, I'll talk about each one of the disabilities. And as we talk about individual disabilities, we still can use that continuum because we have children that might have a learning disability that might be very mild on that end. And then we have children on this end that have a learning disability that might be very severe. Children with autism, you have some on this end of the spectrum and some on this end of the spectrum. Children with autism, learning disabilities, hearing impairments. You have some children on this end that have very mild hearing impairments, and some children on this end that are totally deaf. Some children with speech disorders on this end, they're very mild. Lots of times we'll call those articulation disorders, those where children just developmentally have trouble producing a particular sound. One of the most common is R's. Those of you that watch The Big Bang Theory, anybody watch The Big Bang Theory? You know, anybody know Bowie? Bowie, Kripke, he has trouble with his R's, and that's really, his might be somewhere not on the really low end, because Barry continues, and he's one of the better actors because he can really pull this off. He does it with every letter, and he's very good at it. But then children all the way up on this end who have real trouble with disfluency or fluency, that we would call stuttering, and getting speech out at all, or non-communicating, non-verbal at all. So speech can that range. So I want you, as you think about disabilities, think about not only are there a number of disabilities, but also there's a wide range. Something else related to that, as you think about, well, let's just talk about learning disabilities for a few minutes. Children in wheelchairs are very obviously have a disability. When we see them coming down the hallway, we can look and know that they have, we can visibly see they have something that's keeping them from participating at the same level that everybody else is. Children with learning disabilities don't have that. So as middle school and high school teachers, you'll see a lot of those students. As a matter of fact, when you think about, maybe I'll start using some graphics when I come and speak to this group, but when you think about the number of disabilities that they are, if we had a big pie chart, the biggest piece of that pie would be children with learning disability, because they account for about 40% of all the disabilities that we see in public schools today. And so learning disabilities, if you think once again about that scale, mild disabilities to severe disabilities. We have some children who have, when you think about learning, they process slower. They maybe don't learn as quickly. They have to work harder to get the information. Then down on this more severe end, we have those students who can't read. And that's a real disability if you stop and think about it. Have you ever thought about that? Have any of you ever spent just a minute thinking about how difficult it would be if you couldn't read? And how attending college and participating, because I don't know about your classes, but my class that I teach have to read at least a couple of chapters every week. It's a pretty big textbook, and we're moving at a pretty fast pace. And then there are other things that they have to read along the way. And so to get your input of information in another form is pretty difficult. And so that would probably put them at this end of the spectrum when you would think about the impact that disability has on their learning. So that's regardless of what classes that you're going to teach, you're probably going to see some kids in that category, that learning disability category, since that is the highest incidence of disabilities. On the lower end of disabilities would be deafness. I heard somebody talking about it. Yeah.
We have a group that goes to Rockdale.
Yes.
So they have the deaf ed.
And so those that go to Rockdale know that there aren't very many children in those classrooms. So you guys get to see Randy Octane and some of the teachers.
They don't necessarily know who, they're not assigned to those.
Oh,
they've seen.
You've seen them. Okay. Yeah, so you've interacted with the kids. And so those kids are at the more severe end of that spectrum. We have children that don't have to go to Rockdale, but have some significant hearing loss, and we have people that work with them in the classrooms to make sure that they have amplification systems and systems that help with their hearing aids and those sorts of things. So, but you're going to see those. You're going to see children with those sorts of disabilities, like learning disabilities, in those classrooms, regardless of what subjects that you teach. Here's something I'd like to know. I'd like for you to think about and be prepared to ask some questions. How does special education impact you? Is anybody in special education? Anybody taking a special ed major? Okay.
This whole group is, they're either 7-12,
Right.
so in the specialty area, or there are K-12 elected students. So they
Right.
will all C-SPEDs.
Okay, the C-SPED,
They
but
have
you're
no
not going to,
training.
none of you are going to have to write IEPs, right? Be thankful. Be thankful. So let me get you to think about that and prepare some questions in your head as you're listening to me talk about how that impacts you. But one of the questions that I get from groups like this is, so what does an IEP mean for me? What is an IEP? And first, let's talk about that. An IEP is an individualized education plan that's a document that's written by the school staff. And that team that writes that includes a special education teacher. Lots of times it will include a school psychologist that helps make the determination that the child is eligible for those services. So they do some testing and they gather data to help the team determine if the child is eligible. And that's a big part, and I'll talk some more about that in a minute. But there's always a general education teacher. That's a requirement of the law. The law says we must have a general education teacher in there because here's what we want to make sure. If we're working with a 7th grade child and we're trying to determine what all assistance they might need throughout the day to help them be successful, then we need some input from somebody who's a part of that curriculum, part of that day, who helps provide services and can say, this is what 7th graders need to know. This is what the students encounter in the 7th grade, and can help us make those plans to write that individualized education plan so that we're making providing the right services and the right accommodations so that the child can be successful. So that IEP, that individualized education plan, is a document that's a legal document. We all agree to sign off on it, so it's more or less a contract. And we then implement that as a part of the child's day. And so as a general education teacher, you need to have exposure to that document. So let me say that. Hopefully if you come to Murfreesboro City Schools and you're dealing with a child with a disability, you'll see that document. I know that you would in Rutherford County, they have the same sort of plan, but what we try to do is make sure that you have access to that document to know what's required. Because that document is not only going to talk about services that the special education staff are going to be providing, but it also talks about the accommodations that we're going to make throughout the day. And some of those accommodations might take place in your math class or your social studies class or even in band or during lunch and throughout the day, accommodations that will help them overcome the disability in order to be able to participate and receive what we have a lot of terminology in special education, a free and appropriate public education. So that's what that document is for. I've had this question before, so I'll ask some of the questions myself and then give you the answer. But I've had people ask me, well, how does that obligate me? Can I get in trouble if I don't do what's on the IEP? And I want to be quick to say there are no IEP police. No cars scream up out front with lights flashing and come in to get you because of that. But I do want you to know that it is a serious obligation that we have to make. So if the document says that we were supposed to be making these accommodations to either make a shortened assignment or to provide notes for the student or to allow them extra opportunities or extended time, then those are things that need to be done because that's been deemed appropriate and necessary as a part of that contract. So that's a part that I hope that you'll be aware of. You do have that obligation to follow that. So if the student does have disabilities and they do have an IEP, then that's a part of what you need to be aware of because it will speak specifically about the accommodations that are made throughout their day. Heather, I'm trying to remember what I talked about last time.
Well, one of the things you talked about was what might be on a 504 plan versus an IEP, and I really liked when you threw something out and they had to figure out which was which.
Okay, good. That's true. Let me talk about. So I work with special education. There's another law that provides assistance for students with disabilities, and it's a little bit different. Special education is a sort of an entitlement law, and actually it's basically, well, that's really what it is. It's an entitlement law. It says that students are entitled to certain rights and services and accommodations and those sorts of things. On the other side is Section 504, which is sort of like the law for the, I'm trying to think of the right terminology. And I'm not a legal person, so I don't want to, and I don't claim to be. But it's the law that provides rights for people with disabilities in schools and in workplaces. And so those are laws that protect people and allow accommodations so that they can have access to school or to employment. And so Section 504, the difference would be it does not require any special services. It only requires accommodations. So think about that. And so I'll give you an example. A student with ADHD. Now that's one of those that sort of falls under learning disabilities, but ADHD, that's where a child might have an issue with distractions and being able to pay attention, or they might be impulsive, or they might be a combination of both. So I don't know about you guys, but I think all of us have it. Do you ever get distracted? Do you ever sit? I mean, and here's the thing I know. I think ADHDness goes up the longer you sit. If I were to talk, to lecture for 3 hours, your ADHDness might be out the roof because you're ready to do something else. But there are children amongst us that really have very short attention spans, and they're easily distracted. And there are children who are very impulsive. They might, in an environment like this, decide just to jump up and run around the room. And those of you that have selected secondary, obviously you do want to work with those kindergartners, but they can be pistols because that's, matter of fact, in our class on Tuesday night, I had a friend who was a guest speaker in the class who's been a behavior specialist, and she talked about a child who would every afternoon decide not only was he going to elope, he was going to escape out of his classroom, but he liked to do that without any clothes. And so we're talking about a small guy, probably, I can't remember what grade, first or second grader, and it's just a thing that, that's kind of what he liked, that's how he liked to finish the day. And so, and the challenge of correcting that behavior and working with them, to get him to do that, and then deciding who was going to go get him after he was naked, and having to round him up and take care of him. So, but that's ADHD at its, on this end of the spectrum, okay? As I've talked about a while ago, that spectrum applies to every disability category that we can come up with. But so let's talk about ADHD for just a minute. Let's talk about, not about this little guy. This little guy's going to need some extra help. Because just giving him accommodations is really not going to fix it for him, is it? Unless we say, okay, it's all right to go naked. So what he's going to need, this little guy is going to need some instructions, some help. He's going to need somebody spending some time with him. He's going to probably need some special services. And so he's going to need an IEP. If, on the other hand, we have a student that's in the 6th grade that gets distracted and needs, maybe occasionally just needs a break, or I had a teacher many years ago who allowed her students, she would always say this, she worked elementary school, and she would say, this is your area. And she might even take a piece of chalk and let the child know this is your area. Now, you don't have to stay seated all the time. You can stand, you can even move around your desk as long as you don't bother anyone else. And that would be an accommodation. And that might be all that some children need. And in that case, if an accommodation is all they need in order for them to access the curriculum and be a part of school, then that would be handled under Section 504. So you might, in your class, have some kids with IEPs and some kids with 504 plans, and you'd have to be aware of what you have to do in those cases. So, yes, ma'am.
So when you say special services, you're kind of talking like modifications.
No,
Is
not,
that no?
Well, you could think of that in those terms because they have to have some specialized instruction. Let me put it that way. Okay? Some specialized instruction, because otherwise we would just handle it in the general education classroom and make accommodations and modifications. Okay? Now, if on the other side, the little guy that was running around that liked to run sans clothing, he might need somebody to sit down with him and provide some specialized instruction, help figure out why he's doing that, what we can do to substitute that behavior. Maybe it's just good enough to get his shoes off. you know, and maybe we could help him just stop at the shoes or get his jacket off. And that's good enough to make him feel free to leave for the day. You know, that's what we would do. And they would maybe help him, you know, work out a behavior plan and those sorts of things. So that would be specialized instruction. It's a good question. All right, so that's sort of the two. Do you remember any of my...
Well, take a minute and bring something up, and let's ask the class, do they need a 504
Okay.
or an IEP?
All right. Okay. Oh, good. That's good. Let's think about this a minute. Food allergies. Lots of children come. Oh, that was great. Yeah, because it's not. They're not going to need specialized instruction early. Seizure disorder. It could be both. Well, that's a good one. Because it could be both, depending on what they need. If the seizure disorder affected their processing, and because you can get health services, and so they could get that without an IEP. But on the other side, if they needed some specialized, because here's the thing that happens with seizure disorder. Once again, spectrum. I mean, that whole continuum, not spectrum, but continuum. Think about the continuum. If it's a mild seizure disorder, but just recently we had a student in our school district, and I was talking about it today with a teacher who left for a brief time because he had to have some surgery. And he had some brain surgery to help with that seizure. Now, what we see with this little guy is he has a 4 or 5 second processing issue now as related to that brain surgery, that when he gets ready, if you get ready to ask him a question, you're going to have to wait 5 or 6 seconds to get a response. And it's not just because he's had a long, tiring day like you guys have, but he's got, actually, it takes that long to run through the circuitry for him to do that. And so he's going to need some specialized instruction, which provides those accommodations and modifications together, all together. So think of, it's been a long day, Heather. Sorry. But I'm trying to think of some other circumstances where you could look at the two. But you sort of see the difference between the two. One is a disability that requires additional specialized instruction. And one is just a disability that, if we make accommodations, they can still access the curriculum in the same way. Yes?
What if I'm visually impaired?
Good. That could be either one. The only thing that, if we think about what modifications would we make for you, or accommodations would we make if you're visually impaired? I mean, I wear glasses I used to wear them all the time. I was telling a while ago, I had some eye surgery recently that has corrected my vision, that now I only need readers. But for those of you that wear glasses, you know that you can't do without those, right? I wore glasses for 53 years, and so, but we allow children to wear glasses. That's a natural sort of thing that we allow. Visual impairment, we might have to make some accommodations like providing them larger print. And lots of times we would go through, the majority of those visually impaired children would go through an IEP because we're providing some specialized instruction through materials and supplies that help make accommodations for them. We'll use enlarged screens, and so that's not just an accommodation. We're actually having to provide something for them. Does that make sense? So it would require an IEP to provide a large screen, magnification, to provide specialized materials like enlarged print, and so we can do it that way. If they just needed, I'm trying to think on the other side, I don't know if there would ever just be a 504 plan for
Like if
visual.
they just needed to be at the front of the classroom, maybe?
That's a good one.
But that would just be a 504.
And then, so that would be really way down on this end of the spectrum of the continuum, because it's very mild disability. All they needed was that accommodation. If that were necessary, then we could do that with 504. If they needed anything else beyond that, we'd be over here on this side as an IEP. All right.
Talk about some common modifications or accommodations that they're going to see, because I think that's probably a little bit scary.
It is scary. Well, and let me tell you, and let me say this, I'm the biggest advocate for limiting those accommodations, because when they put everything they write in that IEP obligates you to do some things. So I try to tell our teachers, limit that very much. I'm sorry, I'll stay over here. I'm sorry. Limit that list to what's going to be really meaningful, because here's the thing we can do. We can always say it would be nice if this happened. But what we really need to talk about is what is essential, what's necessary, what sort of accommodations. So let's think about some accommodations that you see. One of the things we know, we have lots of children with reading problems. As a matter of fact, you know, I mentioned reading a while ago. Have you ever thought about what a gift that is and how unique that is, that we can actually take those written symbols on the page and convert it into thoughts? And have you ever noticed about how you read? You know, when you first started reading, you read, you know, letters, then you graduated to words, and now when you read, you're actually reading phrases, because, you know, you guys think about it. You don't read word by word by word. You're scanning and you're going 90 miles an hour. So for those children that have a problem with reading, we do things to help them. We might give them extended time. We might even, you take children who have a real trouble reading, we might even read to them. We might read to them. Read aloud is a big accommodation. You see that because, and principals really want that in schools because they want the children to have the opportunity, because if you have reading problems and you have to take that state test, they want to make sure that you've at least had exposure to it. So they suggest quite frequently, this is a big issue. Principals will say, tell their teachers, make sure that's in that IEP. So because that way when it comes time to take those state tests, whatever tests those are, someone will sit and read those to the students so that they can then provide the answer. So what we're looking for then is not to see, do you know how to read? It's just maybe, do you know science? Do you know this? Do you know biology? You know, for high school biology. Well, what do we want to test? Do we want to test if they can read, or do they know about biology? And here's the thing, you know, there's lots of ways that we all learn. We don't get it all by reading. Thank goodness. I mean, it'd be tough. I'd be limited because I don't have enough time to read, it seems, anymore. But so those are big accommodations you'll see in your classrooms will be read aloud on those tests. Well, what that means for us then is we need to have practice that and use that in advance. Matter of fact, that's what the law says. If we're going to give them that accommodation on the high stakes test, we also should have practiced that so that they'll know what that means. Now, I'll be honest with you. I didn't see it happening nearly as much as we should have because it's very hard to do. It's very hard to read aloud for kids. At one point, who's at Riverdale? Any of you guys at Riverdale? Yeah.
That whole back row.
Back row, okay.
No.
No.
We're at Smyrna Middle.
Last semester, that's where they were.
We'll make a memory accommodation. It's okay.
I've done that twice this year.
But so one of our we tried some experimenting at Riverdale several years ago. I had a friend who was an English teacher, and so we gave her some accommodations. We gave her a computer system basically that would scan documents and convert it to digital to speech, so students could listen to books. And that's a really common. There's a program called Bookshare now, and students with severe reading disabilities can have access to their textbooks and other books through Bookshare. It's a free service. But years ago we were looking at that, and what we found was it was really helpful. If students were reading, especially literature, think about that. What we're not trying to see if they can read. What we're trying to do is get them to learn all about all those literary things. And I'm not an English major, so I'm not going to say that very well. But to learn about plot and to learn about setting and all those other things. And to be very honest with you, it's very obvious I don't know much about literary things as